Yeah, I mean, I guess, just jump into it because the article you sent, it's the one on the Rolling Stones article, kind of what
Oh,
you,
oh, that one there, yeah.
we
That
can
was a
just
little
tie
while
in
ago.
current events and the unraveling of America, which I thought was really neat and a great article you sent. Just how they like explain that our time is up in America as like the hegemonic power,
Hmm.
and essentially, China's next, or Asia, the Asian countries are next, and what does, yeah, so what,
Yeah, well, I mean, I knew that you would like it and appreciate the article because you being a historian, and then is able to, and that article puts it in historical perspective. So
exactly.
I just knew that that you would connect with that article,
I
but
did, thank you.
it's also happens to be, I think, some very good analysis that they did in the article, um, laying out, you know, basically the fate of all empires is collapse. Let's just be blunt about it, and the
Absolutely.
U.S. empire is collapsing. Anyone who doesn't think so has their head in the sand. To be quite
Exactly.
honest.
American exceptionalism, that whole frame is getting thrown out the window. I mean,
Well,
from what's
we're
going on.
exceptionally bad at taking care of our own people.
Exactly. Exactly. And there's so much to go over, and just COVID-19 essentially is, it said it's the last, like, a point in history that is going to signify the collapse of America. However, America was already on the decline. However, this is the nail in the coffin, is what I'm trying to say.
No,
I love,
and that,
yeah.
you're exactly right. In fact, Professor Richard Wolff has said the exact same thing. He said it wasn't COVID that put the economy into free fall. He said it already was. This was just simply the little extra nudge, if you will, that this basically COVID laid bare all the problems of capitalism, especially unfettered crony capitalism here in the U.S.
Absolutely. And it just goes back, the article, it goes back. I did like this because you said the historical part is, no empire long endures, even if you anticipate their demise. Like you just said, every empire demises, every kingdom is born to die. The 15th century belonged to the Portuguese, so the 1400s. The 16th to Spain, 17th to the Dutch. France dominated the 18th, Britain the 19th, and then we have essentially the decline of the British Empire, and then the rise of the United States. And now, since 1940, we had that, the anomalous period, as you call it, where we actually gave a crap about our own people, and people could actually thrive. The 1940s, 50s, 60s era, and then essentially from then on out, we have been on a decline. However, as we have continued, we're still the hegemonic power, but now, the China, other countries have far surpassed us, in many different categories: life expectancy, just our healthcare. It's amazing. I mean, where do you stand?
Well, if you look back, it's like, well, this century was this country. That it's like empires last about 100 years.
Yeah,
It's like, okay, your century's up next, but
exactly. That's hilarious.
but going back to the anomalous period that I call it in U.S. history, what made that anomalous? You had federal governmental regulations on capitalism.
Yes.
You had the government saying you are going to pay at least the minimum wage. You are going to, set aside money for retirement. You are going, that kind of stuff. You are going to have workers work no more than 8 hours, no more than 40 in a week. You pay OT if otherwise. There was government regulations. Enter Reagan and neoliberalism and Thatcher and all that crap that and they've done what? They've chipped away at this. They've gotten, you know, they've gotten rid of the 8-hour workday, the gig economy, all this other stuff.
Exactly.
Now this whole notion of the payroll tax. Well, we're going to fund Social Security from the general fund, which means you can cut the budget to the general fund, which means it's a way to get rid of Social Security.
They'll take
It's a
everything.
way. It's a way to get rid of to close the program. That's what's at stake here. Now, the other thing about that period after World War II up until Reagan was the rise of unions.
Mm-hmm.
You had strong unions advocating for the workers. What was one of the first things Reagan did? He fired the air traffic controllers. He killed the union. And from that, we've seen a decline in the number of workers who are members of union. I think it's, my number may be off, but I think it's something like only 6% of
Oh, it's
workers are
very
in
low.
unions these days.
I think it's only like grocery store workers, teachers. See, I can't even think of anything else.
I mean, yeah,
That's it.
you got your state union workers, and that's the majority of it. But having like maybe at the automobile factory plants, like they used to be, where union workers, a lot of them has been gone now. A lot of them set up factories in right to work state, which is non-union. So when you don't have strong unions, you don't have bargaining power to get better working conditions, better work, better income, better uh, pay for the workers, and better benefits. And everyone's on their own. When you go to European countries, like for example Germany, union representatives, in other words, those who represent the workers, are part of the board.
Mm,
So when any decisions about policies coming down, the workers have a voice on the board.
which is like not heard of in America.
Not heard of here. And that's something that Professor Wolf is always describing and explaining.
Professor
The guy's a
Wolf,
treasure. Seriously, the guy's a treasure.
he is. He is very treasured. He speaks the truth in a great way, in a
He
fun way,
does.
in my opinion. Like he energizes you, even though he's just very. I don't know. He's a good. Like he the way he frames like his his topics are very interesting. But
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate him. He has a good message.
Yes. So you have a whole bunch of those things. You have the busting of the unions, the chipping away of the benefits and the workers' rights, and so on. And let's face it, uh, you know, income has stagnated, if not declined, over the last 40 years when adjusted for inflation, etc. So that
Right.
the buying power is less today than it was 30, 40 years ago. I mean, as an example, in the late 80s, if you were like a butcher in a supermarket, you made a pretty good salary. You a union worker, you made close to like $30 an hour. Of course, it depends where you were, but you made close to $30 an hour. Now they're making $12 an hour, and
Yes,
they're not in
and
unions.
I knew someone who worked in a Safeway butcher shop, like the back. He started off as like, the person who cuts meat. I think he eventually, the highest he ever got, and it's hard. There's only 2 slots to be a manager. He made $16 an hour.
Oh, yippee!
Exactly. So you're saying 1980s people made $30 an hour back in when you're cutting meat in a grocery store elsewhere. Things have declined. And the positions are even fewer. It's we have so many more
Right.
people to compete for fewer and lesser jobs. That's a whole nother issue. America, I mean, we don't have a safety net essentially.
That's absolutely. Oh, I know what it was I wanted to say. You have some of these senators, you know, talking about, well, we don't want to extend the $600 per week, you know, you know,
Yes,
because it just makes people lazy, gives them no incentive to go out and work. Well, geez, maybe the problem is not so much the $600 is too much money, but maybe the wages are shit.
exactly. And getting a job today, I mean, we're in COVID land now. I mean, COVID era. It's completely different. Go out and get a job is completely different if there is jobs.
Well, let's put it this way. Okay, if you had a business and let's say, they had 300 workers, whatever. Okay, so they're shut down because of the virus. So now they slowly open up. They're not going to hire back everyone.
Exactly.
They're not so there's going to be fewer jobs. And because there is so much competition for the very few positions available, guess what happens to the pay? They're going to pay you less.
Yes. It's
So if
infuriating.
before you made $16 an hour, they'll pay you $12 an hour. Oh, you don't like it? I've got 53 other people waiting for this job.
And this isn't like, I mean, the COVID era is not like the Black Plague, because in the sense, essentially in the Black Plague era, I mean, it's a completely different economy, but the population was dying. Yes, population is decreasing based off COVID, but we're still having more people born and living longer than before. You know, there's so many different, you had this topic, the capacity of population, but you know, how much further can we get stretched? How do you feel like what's going on with the projections of like 10 billion by 2100, yet you compare that to where the global average temperature is? I mean, how do you feel
Well,
about all these projections?
well, that's really interesting projection, because if you were to look at the current exponential models, and I actually covered this on my carrying capacity video, if it
Yes.
gets to a point about 20, was it 65, 70, something like that, where you know how when they show the possible projected path for a hurricane in the Atlantic, and it kind of like it fans out, different.
Yeah,
Well, when you look at the population growth model, it kind of fans out, so that one estimate takes it up to 13 billion, another takes it to 9, another takes it to 10. So you've seen these different estimates, and we're at 8 now. So if they're saying 10 by 2100, that's actually is indicating a slowdown
right.
in the growth rate. That's indicating a slowdown, because we've been adding a billion people like every, well, it depends, like something like every 15 to 25 years, something like that. I have to go back and look at the charts to get the exact interval. It's on the graphs there. You just look at, oh, this, it was this number here and this number here, and what's the number of years in between. But if that's the case, every 20, that means in 50 years, which is 2080, it should be, you know, 10 billion, which means we should be pushing 11 billion by 2100. So if they're saying 10 billion, that's actually assuming a slowdown. But also, you have a lot of deaths, especially there are like a lot of young people dying. That means they are not having children, and those
True.
potential children are not having children. So that's how you also decrease the population, is by removing what we call the year class of reproductive age.
Right. And yes, so there's many different situations that we could go towards, but it's based off the modeling today. Things might change in the future, but this is like a hurricane, right? The path might be in between. But
Yeah.
we're still going up, but it's slowing down, right? But people are living longer is an issue. I mean, not, well, it's hard because we all want to live to see stuff, but yeah, people, I mean, so
I
yeah, go ahead.
think I think what's going to happen now is it comes back, putting COVID aside, but COVID is obviously going to be a factor now. Putting that aside, just to try and have, you know, all these people on a finite surface area, you have to feed them, you have to house them. Just, the resources available is tells us that it can't keep increasing, that it has to at some point flatten or start coming down.
We've hit that
So
point.
and now you throw COVID in there, and we don't know how many more pandemics are waiting.
Exactly.
So I expect to actually see a drop off in numbers of people, be it from pandemics, diseases, starvation. And now, if Pompeo is having his way, that pompous jerk, the U.S. might find itself in a war.
What's going on? Lead into something, because what's going on with that?
Well, he keeps saber rattling with China.
Okay,
The
China.
U.S. did a very provocative thing the other day. They sailed a warship into the Taiwanese Strait.
Okay, it's like they're testing the
But
waters, right? Yeah.
basically, extremely provocative, because between China and Taiwan, it's some tensions between those,
Yes.
and the U.S. just sailed a ship right there. And it's just like, what the are you guys doing? And if, I'll tell you this right now: if there's a war to break out between the U.S. and China, Russia joins China's side,
Great point, Jim. I mean,
and
we're not.
and
What
they
allies
will
do we
take
have?
care of the U.S. empire. They will take care of us. You know. And another thing, economic front. Russia and China are working to reestablish the gold standard, but on their terms.
Interesting. So the shift of American hegemony is declining, and you can see
Yeah.
other countries are
And
forming.
basically,
Yeah,
soon the US dollar will no longer be the reserve currency.
yeah,
And if
but
that happens, we're going to see hyperinflation.
in which affects the American people and the consumer and our spending power, which has already been decreased. There's so
That's
many
right.
ripple effects. Yes. Oh wow. Great
And,
Depression Part Two.
and another thing that Russia is really pushing on is cryptocurrency, bitcoins and stuff like that.
Good point.
They're really pushing on that.
Which gets them away from the dollar, correct?
What's that?
Which pushes them away from the dollar, correct? Like
Yes, yes.
using the dollar. Okay, it's to get
And
out of
then
the dollar. Yeah.
and another thing with cryptocurrency, because there's no centralized bank, you can trade that stuff all day long, tax free.
It's the Wild West.
It'll be tax free. So if you're in, I don't know, I'll just pick a country, the Netherlands, whatever, and you exchange so many, Ethereum coins for Bitcoin or for XRP, whatever. I kind of dabble a little bit with it. But if you do some of these tradings, unlike here, it's like you made you made a money on your investment, so you have to pay a tax on it. Nope, not with crypto. Although the U.S. government is starting to crack down on it because they want their cut. So they're actually tracing and keeping track of the trading that people do.
And it's amazing. And I just want to switch real quick before we talk about your climate tipping points. I wanted to have your opinion on what's going on with the election news so far, just Biden and what's been going on. How do you feel? So, we're almost to September, so
Well,
2 months or so. How do you feel?
how do I feel? Putting Kamala on the ticket ensured a second Trump term.
Oh, shoot. You think so? Okay.
Oh yeah,
Go on.
putting her on ensured a second Trump term. Now, add to that the crap going on with the post office.
Yes.
We have, because the people who are more likely to vote by mail, 81% support Biden. Those who are likely to vote in person support Trump.
So his friends,
So, because
yeah.
the people don't want, people who are like smart and realize that this virus is not a hoax, is a real thing, they're not going to put themselves at risk and standing in line to go cast
No,
a ballot. So
absolutely.
they're going to sit it out, or they're going to vote by mail. So by removing the drop-off boxes, from the street corner,
That's
by
amazing what's going on.
dismantling the sorting machines, and by not allowing overtime, the stuff is not going to get delivered.
It's amazing what you just said, Jim. Essentially, corruption 101.
I mean, I'm not making this up. This is
I
what they're
know.
doing.
I know they're taking
This,
them off the streets. It's just like, what world are we in? Like, this is everything just in your face, and they'll deny it. Like, that's not happening, but it is
he
happening.
he is blatantly stealing the election, people.
And he's saying there was an advertisement. We talked about this before, and I know it's not like medieval times, but it's that dictatorship where like the Trump dynasty issue is into play right now, where he wants to stay in power because
Yeah,
of what his corruption and just his ego. I mean, we talked
exactly.
about this. It's just amazing what's going on right now.
It's mind-boggling, and people are just standing by and letting this happen. First of all, these are federal offenses. I don't care who's doing it. And
Yes.
the postmaster general is a Trump flunky who wants to privatize the postal service, and so of course he's going to be taking these steps here. And as I said, it's a federal offense, and you're going to have all these disenfranchised, and that's on top of the shenanigans Republicans do with throwing people off the voter rolls and just closing down voting precincts to begin with.
Because that's the only way they will stay into power. The Republican Party is not popular anymore, right? We've talked about this.
No,
21st century, they have not legitimately won an election. Well, in the
no,
popular vote, I should say. But
no,
yeah,
they haven't. And so that's why it says like people say, oh, when we get rid of Trump, I go, it ain't a done deal, folks. In fact, I think it's the other way. I think Trump getting a second term is a done deal.
which might lead
I
into
hope
the
I'm
third
wrong.
or fourth. I believe it. I mean, I don't want to
I mean, I
believe
don't
it.
like Biden, but geez.
I know, and I knew he was gonna pick Kamala. I just knew it because it's kind of like a reverse Obama situation. But he has the woman issue as well, so he's got all the identity politics checked off. But what is the substance there? But then, yeah, and then Trump's is just a shit show. But
I mean, at this, this is where we need Jimmy Carter to overlook the elections.
yeah,
You know
the
how
English
you know
president
how he
alive.
spent a
Yeah,
lot of he spent a lot of time going overseas, overseeing elections in other countries. We need him to do that here in the U.S.